Okay, today's topic is 5.3, the Green Revolution. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe changes in agricultural practices. So to accomplish this, we're going to describe some advances in agricultural practices, and then also talk about their pros and cons. So the Green Revolution was the shift from family farms, smaller family operations, to large commercial industrial agriculture. So some of the ways we went through this green revolution is through advancements with tractors, so mechanization. This would be using tractors for plowing, tilling, and harvesting rather than using oxen or horses or people. This was great because it increased yields, still does, increases yields, and increased profits for the farmers. However, this also increased our reliance on fossil fuels, which leads to global warming and climate change. And it also compacts our soils, and compacted soils have a lower water holding capacity, so it's going to increase flooding and standing water on our fields. Next, we have genetically modified organisms, or GMO crops. So these are crops which have a foreign gene inserted into them in order to be pest resistant or drought resistant. They could also be used to improve the amount of crops that you can grow in an area, or the size of any particular crop. What you see in this picture here is called BT corn, and BT corn is pest resistant and has an inserted gene which prevents it from being eaten by the grub. So this is great because it increased yield and increased food stability. So now you could grow wheat and corn in areas that were not previously suitable because they were um, too high for droughts and these crops couldn't resist. On the downside, genetically modified crops are genetically identical and they're prone to new diseases. In the last 100 years, we've also started using synthetic fertilizers. We went from using organic fertilizers like manure to synthetic fertilizers such as ammonium nitrate. And the problem with chemical fertilizers is that they go into the soil and they just feed the plant. Versus we see in this picture that the organic fertilizers feed the soil, they feed the microorganisms, it provides the plant nutrients, and it continues that small carbon cycle and small nitrogen cycle right here. But it increased yields, it increased profits. The downside is those nutrients that don't get absorbed into the soil because they just feed the plant wash away and eventually cause eutrophication, which is algal blooms in local waterways due to an overload of nutrients. Another improvement is in irrigation, which is drawing water from the ground or nearby surface waters to put on fields to increase plant growth. This was great because it allowed agriculture to expand to areas that are normally too dry. So GMO crops allow agriculture to come into dry areas, but so does irrigation, and you can see here that they are irrigating the desert. A downside is that irrigation can deplete water sources, so taking that surface or groundwater can deplete those if you take them faster than they refill, and it can also lead to something called salinization, which is increased salt levels in the soil, which is toxic for plants. We've also started using pesticides in the last 100-ish years. Pesticides are chemicals sprayed on weeds, which kills weeds. And they're sprayed on our plants to kill weeds, to kill insects, to kill rodents, or any other pests that damage our crops. Again, increased profits, increased yields. Hooray for everyone. Except those pesticides can run off and kill or harm things that are not pests, particularly bees are very susceptible to pesticides. So to summarize, our goal was to describe changes in agricultural practices, and we've learned today that there are advancements in agricultural practices which have led to improvements in crop yields and improvements in profits for farmers. However, each advancement came with its own disadvantages that should be considered if you're evaluating the use of these agricultural advancements. And up here is a good picture of another GMO product, which is Roundup Ready sugar beets. So you can see that these are traditional sugar beets, and they've been treated with an herbicide, which is going to kill herbaceous weeds. But over here, you've got Roundup Ready sugar beets, and now you can hit them with your Roundup, and it doesn't affect your sugar beets and just kills the weeds. Hooray!